Okay, welcome to Module 3. Hope everything is going well so far. By the time you're viewing this, I should be reviewing your idea generation exercises and taking a look at your discussions from Module 2. I know from some of the initial feedback I've gotten from a couple of students, they've commented that the ideation process is hard. And that's my experience as well, especially the first time you're really sort of sitting down and being forced to really come up with ideas, and it takes a little getting used to. And as folks that are involved in innovation processes, particularly the folks up at IDEO up in Silicon Valley, they say that innovation is hard work. And I think even Peter Drucker, the great management thinker / guru, said the same thing at some point in time, that innovation really is hard work. And so coming up with ideas, some people it flows a little bit easier, for others it's a little harder. I know my own experience, there's sometimes when I'm really fluid with coming up with ideas, and other times I got to really work at it. So you're probably experiencing all of that in Module 2, or experienced it in Module 2. So Module 3 is where we actually transition into entrepreneurship. Module 1 was all about who entrepreneurs are and kind of what they do, what their characteristics are, traits, behaviors, that kind of stuff. Great discussions in Module 1. Module 2, shifting gears, it's about the ideas. Where do ideas come from? How do you come up with ideas? How do I know if my ideas are any good? That kind of stuff. Module 3, we shift into what is entrepreneurship, or and what's the process? What does this entrepreneurship stuff, what does it look like? You got people and you got ideas. What does entrepreneurship look like? And I thought a great example of that was about a month ago. I think it was about a month ago. I read a quote in a news article, and they basically said that entrepreneurship's the development of something from the ground up. You're taking an idea and you're turning it into a business enterprise, hopefully profitable and sustainable, I would even add. And it sounds simple, right? But the definition, can belie the fact that it's a really difficult process. It's really not easy to launch and manage and grow a business, but it is a process. There is something going on there, where people are taking an idea and turning it into something. And that was the path of this class so far. It's the entrepreneur, it's the idea, and now we're merging the two into create a business. And what does that look like? And is there a process? And when I had never really thought about this until I was asked in 2001 to teach an MBA class, an introductory class on entrepreneurship. And I got exposed. I started doing research and looking into I knew my experience and the experience of people I worked with and were friends with and colleagues with, but I'd never looked at what academics or other people thought about this whole entrepreneurial process. And one of the first things I stumbled upon was a book. In fact, I was actually given the book by a friend who was at the time had kind of taken a similar career path to what I have done now, and stumbled into teaching entrepreneurship at a university. And he said, there's this great book by a guy named Jeff Timmons, and here's a copy, take a look at it. That should really help you when you're thinking about teaching the subject. So I did, and Jeff Timmons, as you were exposed to in this module, came up with, unfortunately Jeff's no longer with us, he passed away a few years ago, but Jeff was kind of a rock star in the field of entrepreneurship education. And he's one of the first people that tried to put a process around it. We've talked about people, talked about ideas. I mentioned in the kind of the ideation module, the Module 2 piece, that, or maybe I did it in one of the emails to you guys, that a big shift in entrepreneurship research was moving from what do they do to what do they think, how do they think, and how does that result in actions. But Timmons was at the very forefront in saying, well, if we're going to understand what entrepreneurs do, We got to know who these people are and what's motivating them, but what is it they exactly do, and what's this process look like? And so he, I think, did a really nice job of saying we can model it, and the model might have some utility to how we approach business ideas. But at its fundamental core, as you're going to read about, there's the founder, there's the entrepreneur, that's the leader, that's the visionary, the person with passion, the creative person, however you want to term it. You guys found lots of ways to define entrepreneurs in that very first module. You've got the founder, the entrepreneur, the driver of the process. In Timon's model, that's the person that balances everything. That's the fulcrum. That's the point of balance and leverage for the entire process. But he says, entrepreneurs don't exist without an opportunity. There's an opportunity which is based on a business idea. They have to, the best entrepreneurial ventures engage a team of people to build it, and it requires resources, and the entrepreneur is responsible for acquiring, controlling, balancing, assessing all of these elements, these three major elements: the opportunity, team, and resources. OTR is what we would call it. And he says the model, can help you get a sense of what the process is really like and what an entrepreneur has to face, because he or she has to really have a good sense of the opportunity. They have to have a good team of people to execute on it, and they have to have access to the right resources to make it happen. And there's a lot of elements. I'm not going to go into the model entirely, but I just wanted to introduce the concept that you may have an incredible opportunity, and as you sit down and look at how are you going to approach this and how are you going to execute on this, you don't have a team, or you need another piece of two of the puzzle to build the right team. Or maybe you have the team and you've got a great opportunity, but you don't have the resources. Where are you going to get the resources? And it's going to require a lot of resources. In Timon's approach, this model is constantly moving and being adjusted. So if you've got a tremendous opportunity, you either have to have secured or gotten access to the resources to execute on the opportunity, or if you can't do that, you may have to slice the opportunity or scale it down to match the resources you have access to. So it's a really interesting concept, and I hope that as you go through, you get an appreciation for the fact that it really is a process, and there's all these moving parts, and the entrepreneur, the leverage point, you could look at this and say they're the juggler, they're the person that has to juggle all these things, but I think Tim has did a really nice job of setting the stage and getting us to think about that there's actual process involved in entrepreneurship. For me, I kind of want to switch gears though a little bit and move to what I would call startup models. It's how do we know if our idea is a fit? Is there a product/market fit? And how do we go about creating a business? And I'm going to give you 3 examples, 3 models that I've seen in practice, and then part of the discussion piece in Module 3 is which one is the best, or are they all good, or are there situational elements to them? So it's something to think about. The first model here, it's the most typical, maybe most traditional. I'm not sure best way to describe it, but it's the one that I see the most often. Well, maybe not the most often, but it is very typical and very traditional in the sense that we've always thought of entrepreneurs come up with an idea. They have been taught historically, this is the way a lot of universities have taught, is that you come up with an idea, you develop a business plan, you write a business plan, you then go out and you get access to some capital, whether it's friends and family, or you get a loan, or it's your own investment, and you build your product. You start the marketing and branding and selling process, and then you get customers, and that's how you build a business. So that's the typical approach. Second model is more of a, how shall we say, find your customers first. It it takes the assumption that you need to do planning and moves it in a different direction and in a different way of thinking. It's based on the concept that, or the thought that businesses don't fail because they couldn't develop a product. They fail because they don't have customers. And so they flip it around and say, entrepreneurs come up with an idea, and because business plans never survive their first contact with a customer, they say, planning not necessary at this point. What you need to do is subject your idea to the customer. You have to go out, and in the all-in startup and the lean startup model, you are going to, and let's use what I call the all-in startup model, which is a great book by Diana Kander. I wish I could have assigned it for this class, but we were just too far along in. I couldn't figure out a way to build it into the class, but great book. It's a novel about entrepreneurship. But in the all-in startup approach, it really is, in the lean startup, it's all about using customers to help you build the concept and the product or the service. And Diana's approach and in the lean startup approach, you take an idea and you go out and you talk to customers, and they become part of developing your product. Diana and others and myself say you really should go out and talk to 100 customers and cycle through and continually modify your concept. It's going to, if you develop a minimum viable product, which is something that's basic that can be taken out to a customer, they're going to help you either build it, tweak it, or pivot and go in a different direction because that's not working and that's not what they want. But the whole concept flips it and says you don't have a business unless you have customers. And so if you're going to develop a product or service, you better start by working with your customers first. Working with them and through that process, eventually you'll develop a product that they want and in a way that they can gain access to it. And from there, it's about building the business by branding and marketing and branching it out. So instead of the typical process of, I've got an idea, I'm going to develop a business plan, I'm going to take it out, market it, and then hopefully I'll get customers. It's, no, you've got an idea, start engaging customers now, as many as you can, hundreds if you can. Help them or have them help you build the concept, build the product that's something they need or want. It's based on a pain point or a really strong need. And then you go out and brand and market the product and scale it up. So approach 2 says, no, planning, that can come later. You've really got to make sure that you're spot on and you're providing a value for the customers, and the only way you know is if you ask them, if you involve them. And in the lean startup model, you'll hear that mantra over and over about build, measure, learn. Build a minimum viable product, something that's the basic. It still has bugs. It's not perfect, but you get it in the hands of customers and they tell you, this is great, or I like this, but could you add this, or it sucks, and you do that process to where it's build. You measure the results. You learn. You go to the next cycle. And in some cases, as you'll find out in that lean startup process, you may continue to build. You may tweak. You may pivot. You're going in the totally wrong direction, and the customers tell you that. But it's a really, really valuable, interesting process. Very different from the traditional approach. Approach 3. The third startup model is what I call the SHIT model. Excuse my language. It's SCHIIT. SHIT is an actual company. If you want to look them up on the website or on the internet, feel free. They've got a really interesting website. I'm aware of them because of my interest in entrepreneurship and also my interest in audio products. Not surprising since I was involved in manufacturing audio systems commercially for aviation, but this is a consumer audio company, and a real interesting approach, similar to the other two but not quite. Their approach was, the bottom line for them was, the two co-founders basically said, We think we could build a real interesting line of audio, consumer audio products, and they had experience in the industry. They thought they saw an opportunity, a gap. They felt that they could compete in a certain segment. So they had this idea, and so they said, you know what? And they were consumers of audio, so they were not just people that wanted to take advantage of an opportunity. They were potential customers. They said, we think we've got a really great product, and we've got $10,000, and we're going to design the product, and we're going to build it, and then we're gonna get out there, and we're gonna get it in the hands of reviewers. We're gonna do social media, and hopefully people are gonna buy this product, and we're gonna sell it direct, which is a very unique concept in the consumer audio business because most of it's through dealers and retailers. So we're gonna use a different model. And so they started by saying, hey, we've got X amount of money. We're gonna build the product. We're gonna go out there and try and get it in the hands of customers. And then eventually we'll refine the products as we get better. But we're top-notch engineers. We can build a great product. And their philosophy was, we're going to take this $10,000. That's what we're willing to lose. And the worst-case scenario is, if it doesn't fly, we're going to have Christmas presents for a long time to give out to our friends and family, and in the form of unsold products. So the ship module was, you know what, we're going to build it, we're going to go out there, and we're going to try and make it happen. And if it doesn't fly, we've minimized our risk because we put all that we're willing to risk at stake right up front. We've kind of put our chips on the table right up front. And if it fails, we're just going to take those products and we're going to give them away for presents. And we can afford to lose this money, so if it flies, if it goes, it's gonna be great, and it's gonna be a minimal investment. But if it nosedives, hey, we lost $10,000, but at least we have Christmas presents to give to people for years to come, and we had a fun experience. So a little bit different model. I think there are obviously pros and cons to each of these models. The more traditional model in terms of business planning, first, means that you're going to take some time, and you're going to be doing it without talking to the customer. The second model, really strong, and from the perspective of you're going to get it right from the customer's mouth as to what works. But sometimes, not always, sometimes the customers don't really know what they want or what they need. And a lot of my students will point to Apple when we talk about the customer-centric startup model. They'll say, well, Steve Jobs says that the customer doesn't know what they want, and in some cases he's absolutely right. Probably more the exception than the rule, but there are times when that is absolutely spot on. And then last but not least, the ship model. It's an interesting approach because you're defining up front what you're willing to lose. Helpful for them though, because they had the expertise, the experience, the industry knowledge. They kind of already had a good grasp of what they thought would sell based on their own extensive experience in the industry, as well as kind of consumers of a variety of audio products. So they kind of minimized the risk a little bit. All three models viable. I think the key for you is to figure out which of these three resonates best with you. I think those in the field, I'll just be I won't tell you, but I think those in the field, and it's probably pretty obvious based on some of the readings of us assigned for Module 2, the thinking in the field of entrepreneurship and the thinking among people that are involved in entrepreneurship, whether it's educators or people that are running accelerator programs or incubator programs, there's been kind of a paradigm shift, and everybody has really moved towards the customer-centric model. The startup model has to be customer-centric. It has to be lean. We have to find ways to get to market with the input of customers and not doing it in isolation. So, being upfront about that, that's kind of where the field has headed. But I think there's some viability to all three models. I personally, I love all. I think all three models have their place. Models 2 and 3 probably resonate more with me, but I think they're all really interesting to discuss. At the end of the day, whether it's doesn't matter what the startup model is, it's all going to come back to, how do you know if your business idea is any good? Using those startup approaches, you should sort that out. Doing a business plan should give you a sense of whether your business idea is any good. Is the business plan the right model for doing that? I don't know. That's a good question. Is the lean startup and the all-in startup model 2 that we talked about, is that the best approach? Possibly. Is model 3, how do you know if your idea is any good? Well, with the ship model, they're going to find out pretty quickly. They're going to know within the first couple months if those products aren't selling, and that it's just they're not getting any traction, and they've done some, they've made some adjustments. They're going to know pretty quickly whether it's any good or not. So interesting approaches, but it all goes back to how do you know if your idea is any good? Reinforcing what we exposed you to in module 2 is like, hey, is there a customer who needs what you're going to provide? Are they going to pay for it? Is there a reachable and attractive market? Does it have a business model that can support the company? And is the timing right from both a personal and a market perspective? Is the window of opportunity opening or closing? And then last but not least, do you have the expertise and are you mentally ready to have a go at this? No matter what startup model you use, this is going to get sorted out. You're going to know typically right away. You have to decide which startup model gives you the best insight into whether your business idea is any good before you commit a significant amount of resources. For the ship model, they said, we think our idea is good, and we're going to commit a small amount of resources. We're going to make a small bet, and we're going to see. And it's enough that we're willing to lose it. In Model 2, the lean startup, you're making a series of small bets, not committing a lot of resources until you know if your idea is any good. One of the biggest challenges of Model 1, the business plan route, is that you commit the resources and then you find out really whether your idea is any good. So there are, like I said, advantages and disadvantages to each, but they're all anchored in how do we find out if our idea is any good through the startup process. The nice thing about Model 2, if I could advocate on its behalf, is that it does allow you to commit resources in a scalable way, in a way that allows you to learn before committing big resources, and you're essentially kind of almost doing a feasibility study as a part of the startup process, so it's not a distinct and separate thing, which I think is really, really pretty cool. I talked about a sustainable business model. You get a couple of readings on business models in this module. Just really quickly, the best way of thinking about a business model is it's just how you make money. It's that simple. And when somebody says, what's your business model? They really want to know how you make money. And it's a little more complicated than that, because really, relative to making money, there's the making money part, and then there's what it costs you to make money, which are your cost drivers. So really the business model boils down into those two things, revenue and cost. There's some other things. You're going to see the business model canvas introduced, which makes it a little bit broader concept, but I just kind of want to focus on this business model basic piece to start with, and that you have revenue sources, single stream, multiple stream, interdependent, and loss leader. You're going to read about this in the Harvard Business Review article, but a company that has multiple streams of revenue, newspapers, for example, sell their subscriptions to individual readers, but they also derive revenue from advertising sales. So they have multiple streams of revenue related to that one line of business. Interdependent, as an example, probably the best example is probably everybody has a printer in your office or on your desk at home, and companies like Hewlett-Packard sell printers, but they also sell something that the printer depends on, that it cannot operate without, which is that printer cartridge. And you've probably found out in some cases that if you got a printer that cost you $99, $125, and you went to go get the replacement cartridge for it for the printing, you found out that the cartridge was $60, $70, and you thought, oh my gosh, it's almost as expensive as the printer. And Hewlett-Packard is oftentimes selling printers at minimal profit, but they're making a pretty good profit on the continual replacement of cartridges. So that's an interdependent. One depends on the other. The classic example for that is the razor blade and the razor and the razor blade. Oftentimes they give you the razor, and then you have to buy the replacement blades. And as you've seen, all of you, those blades are expensive, and they're behind bars now. You have to go, get them. So it's a crazy thing. But that's an example of interdependent. When it comes to revenue, you've also got different models. I talked about the newspapers having multiple streams of revenue based on subscription, and then they also have advertising revenue. So you've got these lots of different ways to slice the the way money comes in. If you're going to a gym, you're paying for a membership. If you're a music group, your model is maybe you're selling fan club memberships. You're licensing your music for movies and commercials. You're selling records. You're selling merchandise. Maybe you're endorsing products. Maybe you're deriving advertising revenue because your tour is sponsored by Budweiser. There's lots of ways that, and that's just one example of a music group. They sell records. They so those are unit based. They are sponsored, and they're giving advertising opportunities to Budweiser. They've got fan club memberships. They're licensing their music. They're selling merchandise. They're selling concert tickets. There's tons of ways that they can bring in revenue to their enterprise. So that's probably enough about business models. You're going to read about them, and I think they're pretty self-explanatory. But you need to understand, as a part of the startup process, going back is you really, really have to have an idea of what that business model is that's going to be sustainable for the business. It's a part of whether your idea is any good, whether it represents an opportunity. Just really quickly, one of the projects you're going to do in this class is called a business concept profile. Now, basically what it is it's a quick sizing up. It's a way to really take a really rough look at your business concept from the perspective of the major components of the entrepreneurial process, which is you, the entrepreneur, the customer, the market, which basically is really the opportunity, the resources, the team. I mean, it's really blending all that into like I said, it's a quick sizing up. How do I know if my business idea is an opportunity? Well, you're not going to go through the startup process in this class. You're not going to employ one of those three models, to really find out. So doing a business concept profile would be one way of kind of simulating that process for you anyways. Not quite fully immersive though. And let me use the example of sizing somebody up like as if you met somebody at a party. Let's assume you were single and you got invited to a friend's party and you went there, and as you meet people, you're sizing them up, maybe from the perspective of a friendship or somebody you would like to, you have mutual interests, and so maybe you could play sports together or whatever. Doesn't have to be somebody you have a romantic interest in. Just could be a friend interest. But when you meet people, personally, professionally, the first thing you're really doing is you're trying to understand who they are, and if you see some future prospect of working with them or becoming friendly with them, you're kind of sizing them up. Would this person be worth more of my time? Would I have an interest in spending more time with this person? And likely they're doing the same thing to you. So a business concept profile is a quick sizing up. A comparison is it's really not a full-scale lean startup approach, all-in startup approach. It's not a full-scale let's do a business plan and then launch and all that stuff, which is looking at those would be, hey, if you're going to do the all-in startup or the lean startup, you're making a commitment. You're actually starting to do something with this. And that's akin to, sizing somebody up, connecting with them, and then saying, hey, I want to start dating this person, and then having multiple dates with that person, because it implies a longer process. And really, you know, kind of if you look at the three startup models, that first business planning model, it's beyond dating actually, because you're kind of getting married to it, because once you do that business plan, you get the capital, you're married, you're in, you're all in. The lean startup, more dating, because you can break it off at any time with low cost. You haven't committed all those resources. Um, but in this class, it's really hard, given the nature of the 5 weeks, for me to take you through a dating process. So we're going to give you the quick sizing of process, which is the business concept profile. You do have a template. You're going to work with that. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. I'm happy to help. Um, but again, it's not meant. It's meant to be substantive, but not immersive, in the sense that you're going to go multiple dates with this person. It's going to be more of a sizing up process, as I said before. So I think you'll have an interesting time taking one of your ideas and transitioning it to that business concept, sizing up the profile process. So we've come to the end of this module, and hopefully you got a good sense of the different startup models, the entrepreneurial process, and also, this idea of business models, and then also that, once you have an idea, you've got to find some way to start assessing it. And part of what you're learning in the All-In Startup book is that process of how an idea could potentially move forward, um, and be assessed before you make the big bet and go all in. The next steps for this module, though, are to do the readings, to watch some of the short videos, which cover, basically the idea of the lean startup, and how business models are developed and how to think about business models. There's an interesting article about the business model canvas. So you do that reading and watch those short videos, and then really beyond that, it's you need to start work on the customer interview project and start thinking about your business concept profile, which is also called the rapid opportunity check. I use those terms interchangeably. It's basically the same thing, just depending on what I want to call it at any given time. So hopefully you've got a good insight to get started between the readings, this tutorial, and the video, and also your readings in the All-In Startup, that you've got a good head start in understanding this whole concept, that successful entrepreneurs don't basically see into the future, really. They're not fortune tellers. They actually, to make this a reality, there's got to be an idea, and there has to be some detective work behind it. And as you're doing the business concept profile and designing the customer interview and starting to think about that project, you're starting to think about that hands-on detective work. You're starting to do that hands-on detective work. So hopefully you'll enjoy that process, and I will see you soon.